Good afternoon, everyone. We have got a good number joining us now that I think we had registered. So we will get going. Appreciate that people are either doing this over their lunch or giving up some of their day to join us on this session. So we don't want to keep those of you that are here waiting. So on behalf of the Southwest Procurement Alliance, welcome to you all and thank you for joining us today. My name is Rosie Bates and I'm the Client Support Manager at the SWPA, working with all of our public sector clients across the region. So probably some people on the call that I know and have met. So thank you to all of you. This is the second in our Lunch and Learn webinar series. So we're really grateful to the team at Value Optimised Retrofit for putting this session together today. Comes off of the back of our the launch of our retrofit and decarbonisation framework earlier on this year, and a number of changes to keep up to date with in the world of retrofit, which I think we all understand can be interesting to navigate. So we're really grateful to the team at VOR for offering to put together this session and to share their knowledge with our valued clients and contractors across the region. Like I say, the first in a series. Poppy, our marketing coordinator, is working really hard on bringing the rest of the series to life on a whole range of different topics, so do keep in touch with us for those. So for today, the guys are going to run through key changes in PAS 2035, compliance requirements, supporting clients to understand roles and responsibilities, and what good looks like. So I am not going to dwell too much on this. What we will do is keep everyone muted so that we can focus on the presentations that are taking place. If you have any questions for the team, please pop them in the chat as we go through the session. And then what we will do is at the end of the presentation is come back to those questions and run those through with the team as appropriate. So please pop any questions that you have in the chat. We're recording the session, so if you don't want to have a starring role, please do also turn your video off. And I'm now going to hand over to the team, to Phil and to Craig at VOR, to navigate PAS with us. So over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, yeah, thanks for the opportunity for being able to do this. I mean, we often at VOR get asked what's the changes, obviously, between PAS 2035, 2023, and obviously 2019. And what we thought would be good to do is obviously try and collate all of those and present that, and obviously share that with everyone. So it gives a bit of a guide, really, as to what we're finding, what the changes are, and obviously with the aim to inform and help everyone on sort of their PAS journeys, really. I'll start off by, I guess, we've got this little infographic here, really, and trying to just show what everyone's got to try and remember during their sort of retrofit journeys. And I know PAS gets referenced a lot, whether it's PAS 2035, PAS 2030, whether it's 2019 revision, whether it's 2023 revision, whether it's the original PAS 2030, 2017 revision. There's a lot of changes, and I think what we're trying to highlight here is that these retrofit projects are still sort of, I guess, construction projects. PAS is a part of that, and obviously not saying it's easy, not saying it's obviously going to be quick or simple to deliver some of these schemes without obviously understanding the wider sort of implications of what other things that are happening around, such as Building Safety Act, AWAB's law, sort of changes to Part L, etc. But as you can see, I guess it's really taken off since sort of 2019, since PAS 2035 was launched. There's been a lot of changes, obviously, within the construction and retrofit industry, especially with the funding available. Start off by just, I guess, giving an overview of what the key changes are in the latest version of PAS. So I guess from 2019 to 2023, they tried picking up, I guess, Trustmark and various others, and the I guess the energy providers is looking at what are the main challenges and how can we make this easier and easier to deliver, whilst also tightening up in terms of the quality. And obviously, I don't know if people have read their BBC News app this morning, but obviously there's issues in terms of quality being delivered on certain schemes. So obviously part of the changes is obviously to tighten up on that. So there's 15 key revisions, which I'll sort of go on to explain a little bit now. So key changes, I guess, property archetypes. So what 2019 sort of required was for each property to be designed by itself, and then which didn't give you a lot of opportunity to save a lot of money in terms of your design costs and your retrofit costs. So one of the positives now is that it recognises archetypes, and you can look at delivering lots of homes with very similar solutions, but obviously being cognizant of obviously those little slight changes between each of those properties. Risk pathways, I know that was a bane for lots of people, so they've replaced the categories A, B and C. Funnily enough, similar sort of categories they've got with in regards to building regs of Part F, but what that does mean is it's taken away sort of like items such as compulsory air testing for each property, and having to use specialist consultants for certain properties, which you no longer have to do. So for simpler projects, I guess in terms of single measures, MTIPs, medium-term improvement plans, weren't mandatory, but the key change now is that obviously if it's a single measure, that they are required for each property. Air tightness strategy is now required across all designs. So whereas on risk pathway C properties under 2019, you had to do an air test, it's slightly changed in that you have to do an air tightness strategy. So that's not saying that you have to do an air test, but you've got to have a plan for the air tightness within that dwelling. And that sort of links to the ventilation standards as well, because obviously, depending on how airtight the property is, will have an impact on the ventilation of that property. So I guess the main other change, obviously, just going back to that infographic and sort of what else you've got to be aware of, I guess, during your delivery projects, is that obviously Part F was updated, and Part F is sort of aligned now with PAS 2035, and PAS 2035 is aligned with Part F. I think actually the writers were the same for both, actually. So enhanced retrofit coordinator role. I guess a lot of projects had remote coordinators that could be sat 250 miles away, advising what's happening with those properties. They put a greater responsibility on coordinators, and that includes going out to visit properties now actually to make sure that the actual installations have been done in accordance with obviously the design and the energy modelling. Formal adoption of the BASE retrofit technical guides. Previously it wasn't really mentioned, but obviously now they align with sort of like the internal wall insulation, the external wall insulation, room and roof guides as key reference materials. Whole dwelling retrofit, obviously looking at the home as a whole, making sure that that is the default approach and being clear on obviously what the responsibilities are for that. Well, this is slightly ironic. They say it's a simplified structure. In theory, it's supposed to be simplified outcomes, but it's ideally looking at what you're trying to achieve rather than focusing on the process itself in 2023. And finally, retrofit design and qualification. So one of the main changes here is that previously, whereas your retrofit coordinator could be doing all your designs, it's now got to be done by a qualified designer. So there are benefits apart from the changes, and to understand all the changes. So scalability. So I mean, we're working on schemes which have got 200, 300 properties of a similar archetype. So once you've solved your solution for that home, you can go and deliver the same sort of strategy, the same sort of measures across that property, across those property types. And obviously the benefit of that is that from the retrofit designer, the retrofit installers, the retrofit coordinator, the homeowners, it's all a very similar solution. Everyone sort of knows what's happening on each property, and obviously still being mindful of each of those unique aspects of the property, like the ventilation or the occupants. Obviously that allows a lot more to be delivered in the time frame. Occupant health and safety, so obviously improved controls around ventilation and air tightness. Looking at medium-term improvement plans, so just making sure that obviously you look at a plan for what is phase one, what is phase two, and obviously picking the most appropriate solution. And obviously there could be a number of factors that you have to consider when deciding that. Increased accountability. So main thing there really is that the retrofit coordinators, the retrofit installers, and the retrofit designers, it's real onus on them to make sure those projects are being delivered correctly and on time. And in terms of data collection, I guess what that's identified is that more data is being collected, so that more information is being collected from the onset, which hopefully reduces the risk of sort of unintended consequences. So we often see where a room in roof has been identified as a loft, or a loft as a room in roof, and then obviously it's a bit hard to put loft insulation in a room in roof, and then obviously that the challenges that creates. And I'm going to pass to Phil now in terms of how does 2023 support large scale retrofit?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Phil Partridge. So I head up the retrofit design team here at VOR. So yeah, as Craig alluded to, the 2023 revision to PAS 2035 sort of specifically promotes the adoption of retrofit at scale. It's clause 5.4. Should anybody wish to go and have a further look, but essentially, as Craig suggested, there is more of an emphasis and more of a drive to deliver retrofit at scale through property archetyping. Obviously enables us to achieve quite significant efficiencies on certain projects, primarily for social housing, so the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund projects, previously SHDF. That's where we'll see the vast majority of retrofit at scale be implemented, less so on formerly HUGs and now local grant, where that's sort of owner occupier, sort of individual street properties. But there are essentially, certainly at the pre-development stage, really significant efficiencies that can be had primarily around the design. So what as Craig mentioned, the projects that we're working on in Bristol at the moment, where we've actually managed to identify a very small number of archetypes and deliver significant savings in time and obviously in cost through the design phase. And these particular properties are flat types as well, where planning permission is required for the external wall insulation. So there are huge efficiencies in the other sort of legislative parts of the project outside of just the PAS requirements. Obviously, they are considered construction projects, so the planning and the building regs applications were able to be efficient as well. So that can kind of spill over beyond the specific remit of the PAS requirements. So that's something. What we're really keen to sort of encourage our clients and our partners is to really consider their stock reviews at the very outset of the projects. And it's something that we've supported lots of clients with in understanding what their stock looks like. So we've reviewed sort of stock portfolios which have, may have 20, 30 individual pieces of information about their entire stock list. But actually, when we start delving down into the details of that, what might be considered to be an archetype may not actually be an archetype, or what may not be maybe. So it's something that we really try to promote, understanding what your stock looks like at the earliest opportunity. So we've a lot of experience in that, and very happy to look at that. But essentially, it enables us to not have a pattern book, but that is kind of the part of the drive of PAS 20 of the 2023 edition. I think it's widely acknowledged that treating however many homes it been identified, or circa or north of 20 million homes, to try and achieve our 2050 net zero goals, is going to be a very tall order unless we can start implementing these at scale. So kind of a pattern book for certain property types is where we'd like to be, notwithstanding the requirement to assess each individual home on its individual merits and understand and acknowledge any variations away from what that archetype might look like. But that's a significant opportunity, I think, for us to deliver more efficiently. We'll move on, Craig. So yeah, essentially, there is still very much a requirement to avoid the one size fits all. So whilst the pattern book may deliver sort of 80-90% of what the end result, the deliverables for that property might be, there is still a requirement. So we've adopted a strategy for archetype designs, of having an archetype design with a design addendum that has the property specific information. So each and every property still needs to have its own individual design, and it still needs to be lodged individually as an individual home. But the actual delivery of that information can be archetype led with property specific factors that can be sort of bolted on to the archetype, if that makes sense. So yeah, there are still, and that can go, so that's primarily from a design perspective, but that can also be fed back in at the early stages to the retrofit assessment as well. So we can identify, so if we had a 250 properties which we considered all to be of the same archetype, once we've assessed the first property, we can add significant efficiencies to the assessment criteria by predetermining a lot of that assessment information. It doesn't negate the need to go and physically assess the property, but that assessment, then a lot of that information can be predetermined, and the role then becomes an identification of variations as opposed to starting from a blank sheet of paper every time. So there are quite significant savings to be had sort of across the retrofit processes. It's not purely from design. I think that probably covers. Back to Craig.
Yeah, so I guess the retrofit stages could be broken down into sort of like your initial assessment, I guess the pre-development works, which is like your initial IOE, MTP, which can be done by the RC and obviously collaboration with the retrofit designer. You've then obviously got your on-site coordination and design, and then obviously your post-completion. So we're trying to split down here, trying to identify obviously at what stage of the, I guess, the retrofit journey that the changes really kick off. And obviously there are changes starting with the retrofit assessments. So one of the challenges under 2019 was, I guess, some of those, 20-minute retrofit assessments where someone went into a property and could say that it had typical windows on their RDSAP, or they could just basically go in there and get the information and come out quite quickly without capturing that. So I guess all the necessary measures that have already been installed, etc. So 2023 sort of stops that from happening, and that, I guess, that's the same as RDSAP 10. So as much as we've had the additional challenge of obviously PAS 2035 being updated, we've had RDSAP 10 introduced, and I'll cover that in a bit more detail in a bit, but obviously that does impact obviously the assessment itself. So the main changes really is the emphasis on ventilation. So we all hear the stories of damp and mold in properties, and certain properties have already had elements of damp and mold, but they've had their measures selected not based on any of the existing condition of those dwellings or those occupants' homes. So obviously there's a big drive on that. Obviously approved document F, so the building regs has changed during obviously the last couple of years, and obviously there's a greater alignment now to Appendix D. And that relies on checking much more in terms of the ventilation on those properties. So now you have to check the extractor fan make and model, and check the flow rates as well. So if you can't find out what the fan model is, now the reality is that obviously once you go and test those fans, I'd say 95% of the time they're not actually achieving the flow rates designed, and that's often because they've got long ductwork bending sort of left, right, up and down before it exits the house, or it's clogged up with dust. So I mean, one of the big challenges on the assessments there is obviously just because it says it's achieving 8 litres a second doesn't mean that obviously in reality that is. And then what could the impact be for the resident if obviously they had their home made more airtight and obviously the extractor fan still doesn't perform as it should do. And I guess equivalent of background ventilation as well. So apart from the air tightness strategy being required in terms of design, that fundamentally relies on a good check of the ventilation of the property under the retrofit assessment. Broadly, I think that it's safe to say that the retrofit assessments just take slightly longer than what they did under 2019. And obviously there's new coordination requirements as well as there being new assessment requirements. So Main changes, so a medium-term improvement plan, improvement option evaluation required for all properties. One of the unique things under 2023 is it also asks for it to be updated at the end of the project. So I don't know how many of you have seen, but you might see an IOE produced at the very beginning, and then the measures change during that delivery process or program, often because the resident, it might be that that particular measure doesn't work on that property, or something occurs in the design that identifies that can't take place. So there's now sort of like a two-stage approach to that, which is good for those properties and good for the clients, because obviously that ensures that the information's up to date and make sure that the right measures are being selected. I guess retrofit advice. One of the key challenges is completing installation. So making sure that you're bringing obviously the homeowners, the occupiers, the tenants on that journey to make sure that they're aware of the process, what it involves, what does ventilation mean for them, what does a trickle vent actually do, what does it mean if it's not installed, and then obviously what the RC needs to do is ensure and sort of document that they've had those conversations. And we find that obviously that engagement's critical to successful delivery. So if everyone's aware of what's happening, they're aware of the positive, what needs to be done, what they can, what they can't do, generally improves, I guess, the intended outcomes all the time. And I guess site visits now. So this is one of the, I guess, the major changes is that rather than it being remotely confirmed by a photo, that you've actually got the retrofit coordinator or the retrofit designer actually attending site and obviously checking that it's actually been installed correctly, again, which helps, I guess, the intended outcomes being achieved. And also having been a coordinator and being a coordinator, one of the challenges we see is you get sent photos of a completed installation, and then you look at it and then go, well, that's interesting because you've completed the loft, but then someone's gone up there afterwards to put an air source heat pump or the pipe work in for new heating. And then obviously one of the challenges there is, well, the loft installation was in place, but then someone else has been up there. So even though all the photos demonstrate that you've got a good installation, when you actually go to site itself, you actually go, oh, right, okay. So you can see what's happened. Some of the installation's been moved, and obviously that causes sort of like cold and damp spots in those properties. And obviously I'll pass to Phil in terms of the new design changes.
Yeah, so as Craig mentioned, there's a significant emphasis, or even more of an emphasis, I think that there always was, but it's sort of been turned up a notch or two around the ventilation assessment. So as Craig mentioned, as part of the retrofit assessment, there's a data gathering exercise for compliance, and there's a checklist in the revised Part F, which is Appendix D. So that's a checklist that should be completed by the retrofit assessor. And that information then gets fed back into the design, and then obviously the designer has a requirement to sort of validate that or understand what the implications of that existing ventilation situation is for that property and how that might need to be upgraded. As I said, there's a much more aligned approach with the ventilation requirements and Part F, and there's a. So the risk category, the risk pathways have been removed from PAS 2035. There's the slight concern that it could be misinterpreted that risk categorizations, easy to say, in relation to ventilation have also been removed, but that's not the case. So the risk category that you might now hear referred to under PAS 2035 relates to the ventilation risk, which ties back in with Part F. So the critical factor here, and I think something that's sort of misunderstood, is that Part F has a table that identifies fabric measures and where existing homes are improved with certain fabric measures, and they're identified as minor or major measures, and then there's a table that would categorize the increase in risk from installing those measures. But the critical point that's often missed is that those measures are relevant to the property from its original construction, so not from its time at retrofit assessment. For example, a mid-terrace Victorian property that had previously had loft insulation and UPVC windows, it may be considered that when the retrofit assessment was carried out, that those were already in situ, and proposed fabric measure, it could be EWI or IWI, whatever that might be, but you have to take into account the existing how the building was originally constructed. So it would have been single glazed sliding sash timber windows and unlikely to be any loft insulation at all. So it's just making sure that any previous energy efficiency measures are also included in that risk categorization. The long and short of that is that it's probably very unlikely that a building would not pass the requirement under PAS 2035 to have its existing ventilation system upgraded in accordance with Part F. So any fabric measures, there's a requirement to verify to review the existing ventilation. Any mold or condensation identified, there's a requirement, and if it's category B or category C in Part F, then there's also a requirement. I think it's probably reasonably unlikely that we would find any property that does pass all of those tests. So invariably, we would always review the ventilation strategy and propose a compliant ventilation system in accordance with Part F and PAS. So that's one of the key changes to the ventilation. And I think that probably covers the key elements. I won't necessarily go into all of those. Air tightness strategy, I think Craig touched upon this. So the requirement for air testing has been removed as a stock. So I think that was where risk pathway C was identified. But obviously, we've done away with pathways now, risk pathways. But the air tightness strategy is a requirement from the retrofit design. I think what's really important to say that is if at the energy modelling stage, an air tightness score forms part of the energy modelling under RDSAP, then there is a requirement post-installation to validate that air tightness has been achieved. Obviously, there can be quite a significant variation in the proposed EPC score if the air tightness is particularly high or particularly low. I think typically, if we proposed a significant fabric measure, EWI, etc., then we would suggest an air tightness target of 3 it would be put into RDSAP. We need to validate at the end of post installation that has been achieved. Otherwise, the proposed EPC is unlikely to be a sort of a true reflection of what was modelled. So that's really key. I think as part of the strategy, so each individual fabric measure needs to have or rather, there's best practice guidance around that. So we've taken on the approach that each individual measure needs to have a strategy, and then there's kind of an overall strategy where those measures interact. So that's really key. So I think window replacements are seen as quite a sort of a straightforward, take the old windows out, replace the windows, a bit of silicone mastic here and there, and we're okay. I think I think it's sort of acknowledged that that's probably not okay from an air tightness, because that's a relatively short term. I think mastic and silicone have sort of got a 10-year lifespan on them. So that's a relatively short-term solution. So air tightness tapes and detailing around these critical junctions is really important. So that's something that we certainly build in. There's also a requirement in there that if the air tightness score isn't achieved post-air testing, that a strategy is put in place to look at remedial works to achieve that. So it's not a case of, we've not quite made it, but we'll just walk away. There has to be a strategy to how we can achieve that score. And then finally, I think Craig touched upon sort of retrofit advice as a whole. So there are 4 key stages, and the retrofit design advice forms one of those stages, and it needs to be, PAS is very clear now, so it's simplified the retrofit advice in the 2023 edition. It used to be very intrinsically linked with the risk pathways. Now that's been simplified. But from a retrofit design perspective, it needs to be, we need to present advice. So it can be delivered by the retrofit coordinator or the retrofit designer. Typically, it's from the coordinator because they would have been in touch with the client and the resident sort of throughout the process. But as a design team, so we now provide individual measure-specific retrofit advice, and it's appropriate to the audience. As I said, it's measure-specific, but it must be delivered post-installation, post-design, and then recorded by the RC. So I think that's something that we should be looking out for in our projects, and it's possibly one of the more important stages of design. Of advice, so that the resident is fully aware of the implications of that installation. that's probably the covers the design advice.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And just to make things a bit more fun for everyone, apart from changing PAS 2035 between 2019 and 2023, I'm sure a lot of people have had a lot of fun trying to get all their lodgements done and all their assessments done and put on the system before the deadlines. They then decided to, shortly after changing between, or the transition between the two, I guess 2019 and 2023, RDSAP 10 was confirmed, and in June that created a lot of fun for everyone in terms of what did that mean for my pre-assessments, what did it mean for the retrofit assessments I've done previously, and what does it mean in terms of my energy models, my EPCs, my EPRs. And it does obviously have a impact on, I guess, stock review, and obviously it does have some changes from the previous revisions. So just cover sort of what they are. So on certain schemes, you might have worked with coordinators who are using full SAP. Originally, PAS 2035 was very much of the view that it identified PHPP, for example, and I very rarely, in terms of social housing, I've seen anyone use the passive house software for modelling their stock, but full SAP was quite commonly used. And obviously the benefit of the full SAP modelling is you got the benefit of air testing, for example. So if you scored a 3 on your air test, you could probably gain an extra couple of points, whereas the previous RDSAP would default to level 15 or score of 15, which meant you wouldn't score as well. So those changes have created a few challenges on certain projects. So if you can imagine that some of the assessments were done in the original RDSAP, and then obviously once they've gone to be completed and lodged, that RDSAP was no longer valid. So it did create a bit of a challenge, because obviously even though you could complete and lodge the EPR onto Trustmark, your national, I guess your government database EPC score had to be under the RDSAP 10 sort of guidance. So I mean, we've had discussions with DESNES and I guess various people like ARC in the industry of how that's impacted. But I think if anyone's got any of those issues, they're quite solvable actually. And what we found is that the more information you've obviously collated during your retrofit assessment, and the 2023 requires that more information, the more aligned your RDSAP score actually probably is from your from your pre sort of energy model aligned to your post energy model. I mean, that has created a few headaches for a few people, I do know that. Yeah, finally, yeah, thank you for everyone's time. Is there any questions?
So there's nothing in the chat at the moment, but if anyone of my camera's doing a very odd thing, there we go. So, but if there's anything that anyone wants to pop in the chat, or we can see if we can manage anyone wanting to ask a question by raising their hand, and then we can come to you live if there's anything anyone would like to ask these guys. Well, we've got them here and all their expertise and knowledge. Great opportunity. Everyone's definitely eating their lunch and not wanting to ask a question and speak mid sandwich. Okay. I'm guessing probably a lot of information to absorb. I know we were lucky enough to go through all of this with the team previously, and a lot of information for us as a SWPA team to absorb and take on board. So we will share the slides. Oh, excellent. Nat, would you like to
sorry, thank you. That was really helpful. I was a little late joining the webinar because I had logging in issues through Eventbrite. Is this recorded by any chance, and will that be coming out, or will there be a pack of slides or any supporting information that can be forwarded out to those that have attended?
Yeah, so we've recorded the session, so Poppy will share the link for the session with those of you that have attended today, so you can go back, rewatch, absorb, and we'll share a copy of the slides as well, so that you've got those and the information.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Am I okay to add something in, Rosie? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so just it wasn't in the slide, but it was just obviously to note that obviously as we go from the transition from wave 2, wave 2.1, wave 2.2 to wave 3 delivery, we are aware that obviously lots of homes have been sort of caught mid-delivery, or they've started and they've not actually managed to progress under wave 2, and then they're being moved into wave 3. And one of the questions we're often asked is, do you have to go through the entire process again from the start to deliver those under the wave 3 process? And we've been having discussions with DESNZ and various others in terms of how can we make that as pain-free as possible, so that people aren't having to abandon a property sort of mid-delivery and then restart that process to deliver it under wave 3. So quite a lot of our work at the moment is supporting clients on, I guess, projects that have started and not been able to complete under their wave 2 funding, but then looking to move into wave 3 funding. How can you provide the necessary information for PAS 2023, even though you started it under the 2019, I guess, process? So if anyone's got any of those sort of issues, just let us know, because we spend quite a bit of time helping clients solve that at the moment.
Thanks, Craig. Anything else? Okay, great. So thank you to all of you at VOR for your input and your contribution. So like I say, link to the recording and also copy of the slides will be sent around to everyone who's attended today. I'll give you guys a plug. VOR appointed to one of the consultancy work streams on our retrofit and decarbonisation framework, focusing on strategy and policy development. So clearly where their expertise lies. So there's a procurement route there for them if you have a need to work with anyone with this skills, knowledge, expertise set. So okay, last chance for questions. No, everyone. Oh, there we go. Noreen, do you want to come off mute and ask a question?
Yes, just a quick one, and you may not know the answer, but are you finding that projects are delayed because of, say, for instance, the need to go to site now to assess, because presumably coordinators were covering a very wide area, and if they have to go to site to see individual projects, is that causing a delay?
I can answer. In terms of the projects we've worked on, not particularly, but I do, in terms of the coordinators, I think it has an impact in terms of completing those properties, because we were visiting properties under 2019, but under 2023. So if it is being delivered currently at the moment, then the coordinator's got to go out and they've got to assess all with the designer during the delivery. And there's a couple of stages they got to go to. So I guess EWI is a good example, really. You've got to go out, visit that property, look at what the mid-installation's like, produce a report for it. And then obviously there could be feedback from those reports. So that might impact the timeline in terms of if there's any rectification works. But then there's got to be, I guess, a validation at the end that that's actually been installed in accordance with the design. So in terms of getting those projects completed and lodged, it does actually cause a bit of a added time frame in terms of getting those completed.
It's probably fair to say that it's sort of untested, I think, from a delivery, an on-site delivery perspective at the moment, because the 2020, any projects that are being lodged under 2023, we're very early in their sort of lifespan, aren't we? So we're very much in the assessment stage still, the assessment and design, as opposed to the installation stage. And I think that's where the additional resource requirement is likely to be. But yeah, I think it's a very valid point. It is going to have additional resource requirements.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Yeah. And when did it actually come in? Because we're saying 23, which sounds like it's been in place for 2 years. But when did it actually hit the ground?
I think the transition was around about March. sort of time. So yes, it does. It's a very good point, isn't it? Because they are working on PAS 2025 revision. So who knows when that's going to come out and become live, probably 2027. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge for the industry has been that this transition between the PAS standards, there was this hard deadline, and it was all to do with the accreditation bodies. I think the BSI had they put in their previous in 2019 that it had a very defined end date, and that meant that had to end on that particular date, and then 2023 became live. But I mean, at the moment, there is nothing stopping you from delivering Wave 2 properties using the 2023 standard. So even though the intent has always been on Wave 2, that it be under PAS 2035-2019, properties are still being delivered under Wave 2 under the 2023 standard. So there's nothing stopping you. There's no requirement for you to have to do under the 2019 if you've still got those properties to complete. So we've had some that they've just missed those transition dates, and then we're delivering those under 2023 rather than the 2019 standard, which is a bit stressful for everyone involved. If you can imagine, like any changeover, like when building regs gets updated, and like one day you work into one standard and then the next day you work into another. I think one of the challenges in the industry is we just seem to have a change every 3 months, which is what causes everyone a bit of stress.
You have the option then to continue with the 2019 if you started with the 2019.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the assessment was lodged by the certain date on the government portal, you could continue with the 2019. But if you hadn't done it by a certain date, then you had to move to the new 2023 delivery. And that's sort of the advice that you get into quite a lot of detail, because it's all to do with how far through the process are, what you're timing, whether you've lodged it on the system or not. We've got a few projects which we've been asked to go and have a look at, where the client's spoken to us where projects are started and the coordinator hadn't actually lodged it on the system. So when they found that out, that obviously causes a lot of stress for people, because they go, oh right, I've got 10 projects here I can't get funding on now. I'm halfway through delivery. How do we go about doing that? And usually there's a way of there's a process. Designates want you to be able to deliver. They're not actually trying to force you to make it difficult, if I'm being honest.
Of course, yeah, good, lovely. Thank you very much. That was very helpful, and thank you for the presentation.
Sorry.
Thanks, Noreen. Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys. So like I say, there will be a whole series of these type of sessions coming over the next few months. So please keep an eye out on our LinkedIn, or be signed up to our newsletters and e-shots, and Poppy will be promoting the next sessions and the topics as we have them organised. But thank you all for your time today. Thank you for your support of South West Procurement Alliance, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.